building. So
thank you, Professor Kumar Swami and your team, and thank you, Registrar Pawan Kumar Garu and the Principal, Dr. Noor Jahan Garu. I deem it an honor to interact with all of you on this very important theme. Now, I want to declare my own biases because each of us brings a perspective. I grew up in a village. I went to a Telugu medium. Vinipistunda? Am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Audible, sir.
Okay. As I was saying, I went to a Telugu medium Panchayat Samiti school, today's Mandal schools. In those days, we called them Panchayat Samiti, the primary school. Then I went to Telugu medium high school in the same village from 6th grade to 10th grade, Zilla Parishad High School. My generation benefited immensely. Though education was not yet universal, enrollment was not universal, at least those who went to the school, a significant proportion of them fulfilled their potential. There are tens of thousands of kids who grew up in that era who are now playing a very prominent role all over the country and the world in various sectors. When I go back to my school where I studied, and I keep going back for the past 40, 45 years, I left school way back in 1969. That is 51 years ago. I was 13 years old at that time. When I go back to that school or any number of schools, I would have visited literally thousands of schools in the last 30, 40 years. When I visit a school, I actually spend an hour, 2 hours with the children. I ask searching questions. I try to spend some time teaching. So these are not superficial observations. When I look at those schools and the kids in my shoes today, 50 years later, things should be infinitely better. But things are infinitely worse. 80% of the children going to schools today, they have no future. I'm saying this with a great deal of pain and anger because I am a product of those schools. There is nothing more important than education for a country. If everything else is given up, if God appears before us and says, look, don't ask for too many things, I will only grant you one wish. I would say education, education, education. And if there's one sector where we have failed spectacularly in India, it is education. That is despite formidable advantages that we have. Our children are bright and hardworking. All the students here, you all know that your parents sacrifice a great deal. Our families, irrespective of Hindu, Muslim, Andhra, Telangana, North, South, rich, poor, urban, rural. Every family is willing to sacrifice a great deal for their children. There is almost no other country like this. They're willing to give their desires, their dreams, their own needs in order to give the children a head start. You're all in the universities. We're all where we are because our parents sacrifice a great deal. As a matter of routine, they don't even say that. Our society values education. When you get into a good course, get a good rank at any level, see the amount of publicity, amount of adulation in our society. Even our governments are spending quite a bit of money. The policy says about 4.4% of the GDP. A lot more is welcome, but 8.8 lakh crores is not small change. 8,80,000 crores. That's the government expenditure alone. We have everything. Telugulo సామెత ఉన్నది అంగట్లో అన్ని ఉన్న అల్లుడి నోట్లో సరుందని చెప్పాను. We have all the ingredients for first-rate education, but sadly, the outcomes are appallingly poor for most of the children, particularly the children who most need it. The rich people, the children from educated families, whose parents can take care of them, I'm sure they will overcome the handicaps, at least if they have the desire, they work a little bit. But it's the bulk of the people that matter. I do not know if there is a God. I always keep telling people, I do not know if there is a God. My policy in dealing with God is one of mutual non-interference. If God doesn't bother about me, I don't bother about God either. But I do believe that there is sin. I believe the greatest sin is unfulfilled potential. If a child born with innate talent and ability is not allowed to grow to the natural level of ability because we have denied that child quality education to hone those skills and talents, then to me that's a terrible sin. That's a great scourge. And India is home to that great sin in abundant measure. So that's the perspective in which we have to look at the policy. The second admission I have to make is I have played some role in shaping this policy. I was the first one probably meeting Dr. Kasturirangan and his team after his team was constituted in Bengaluru. We had a 2.5-hour riveting meeting discussing in detail with a lot of evidence and a lot of logic and looking at alternatives and options. So obviously, there are many things that we discussed and we debated that are finding place in this policy. I would make my comments as short as possible, maybe no more than 20-25 minutes. Leave it open for a lot of interaction. Let me address two questions primarily and one question a little peripherally. The first is, where are we? Why am I making these sharp comments that our education has failed? This is a very sharp comment. The second is, what does the policy address already? If we admit that there is a problem with our education, what is the policy actually attempting to do? And the third question, which I'll partly address, is what do we do now that the policy is in place? And then we'll have interaction. I'm sure all the bright young people, the students and the faculty, you all have a lot of questions, a lot of ideas, a lot of concerns, a lot of experience. First, where are we? You know, it's very common for us to claim credit when a Satya Nadella becomes a Microsoft CEO, or a Sundar Pichai becomes a Google CEO, or Indra Nooyi, or somebody else. Obviously, the best in our country are comparable to the best in the world because in terms of intelligence, culture, history, tradition, we are not inferior to anybody else. But a nation's accomplishment is not decided by the best alone. It can be judged by the average. And there we fall woefully short. Any number of surveys, the first survey of this kind was released in 2005, ASSER survey, Annual Status of Education Report. In fact, I released that report in 2005 in Delhi Constitution House along with Montague Singh Ahluwalia, the then Planning Commission Deputy Chairman. Both of us released it. Since then, I've been following very carefully ASSER surveys. I've been participating in them. They make extremely depressing reading about school education. That survey is a very crude tool, very honest tool, but a very crude tool. It does not even look at critical thinking and conceptual understanding and application of knowledge. It only looks at, can you read? Can you do a subtraction? Can you do a division? That's all. Not even when do you do it? How do you do? Why do you do it? Even by that simple test, the findings are extremely depressing across the country, in all the districts of India. 25% of the kids in India in 8th grade cannot read a 2nd grade level passage in any language. 40% in 8th grade cannot do a simple subtraction, 2-digit subtraction, 75 minus 46. 60% cannot do a division, 3-digit by a single digit, 365 divided by 7. Year after year, district after district, all over India. There is a survey called PISA survey, Program for International Students Assessment. This is for global comparison of educational outcomes at school level at the age of 15. The rich countries, OECD countries, started this to compare among themselves. Then they extended it to the rest of the world. Other countries voluntarily participated. Here, the measurement is a little more sophisticated. Not merely can you read and can you do arithmetic. They actually look at communication and comprehension in language. Do you understand? Do you know how to communicate? Mathematics, conceptual understanding and application of concepts. Science, logic, because all science is logic. Can you derive conclusions from the given facts or observed facts? So, real education, but not complicated, not rote learning. A good 7th grade student must be able to do well. A bad MSc or MA will not do well. India participated in that survey. Out of 74 countries or entities, I don't want to go into details of that, countries versus entities. We can take it as countries for our purposes. India stood second from the bottom. Let me repeat. Out of 74, we stood at 73rd. We are lucky that a country called Kyrgyzstan was on that list, because they got the bottom rank and we missed that bottom rank by that whisker. Then I went to town. I talked about it across the country, tried to mobilize public opinion and sensitize the bureaucrats and the leaders, so that we will try to look at what is wrong. Why are we doing so badly in a country with so much intelligence, so much of passion, so much of sacrifice? Why are we doing so badly? I hope that we would look at it. The response of the government was stunning. I expected the government to challenge these reports and say, no, we are actually not doing badly. That can be verified. Or say, all right, let us see what we need to do to improve education. But neither was the response. The government said, henceforth, India shall not participate in PISA surveys. Like an ostrich, if you bury your head in sand, do not even compare yourself with other countries. You can pretend that you're doing very well. This happened in 2009. Since then, 11 years later, we have not participated in the PISA surveys. Only recently we announced that we will participate, but only select schools, Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas and Kendriya Vidyalayas. Even now, we don't want to expose our average to the competition. Let me give one more evidence. When surveys are done between 14 and 18 years of age, that means more or less you finish school, between 14 and 18, 25% between 14 and 18 cannot read in any language now in 2020. 50%, a good half of them, cannot look at a watch and read time. My watch shows 43 minutes past 10 o'clock or 17 minutes to 11. Now about 70-80% are able to say it's past 10 or close to 11. But 10:45 or 10:43, only 50% of the youngsters in India are able to say in 2020. Basic life skills are missing. 50% cannot go to the market and measure the weights. If you want to weigh, let us say 2.5 kilos of brinjal, they do not know how to put 2.5 kilograms on one side of the balance to accurately measure or accurately weigh on the scale. Basic skills, and we expect to create a great society or to eliminate caste or to give opportunity or to enhance incomes or provide employment to these people who unfairly, for no fault of theirs, they are denied the opportunity to fulfill their potential. There is a humongous tragedy in the country. I want us to understand. A totally unnecessary tragedy because of our colossal neglect and failure. Because there is no other tool to promote equality, equity, dignity, to eliminate caste, to end poverty, to create employment. Everything else is bogus. This is the key. That's where we are. And higher education, when school education has failed so much, there is no way on those weak foundations you can build a great higher education. While we have 24 crore children in schools, government and private, 50% of them in government, 50% in private roughly, and the private school children number is growing because people have lost faith in government schools. But the private schools are not doing much better either. They're marginally better. Out of eagerness, even the poor parents are sending their children to government private schools, paying a lot of money disproportionate to their income. But overall outcomes are very poor. We have 3.7 crore youngsters in colleges and universities. But again, 80% are useless. I can tell you with great pain and with total honesty that a large number of our university graduates and postgraduates cannot even measure up to the standard of a school graduate in most countries. For no fault of theirs, they simply are not given the opportunity. We have inflated grades, we have rampant mass copying, we have rote learning, we have pretense of education and certification, we have no real learning. Now, what does the policy attempt? I will quickly list some items in school education, university education, and conclude. First of all, what should a policy do? If a policy is a pious declaration of intent, we will give education to everybody. That's not a policy, it's a slogan. And we have been giving slogans wonderfully in this country. There is no country which is better at sloganeering than India. A good policy is not a slogan. A policy must actually create the institutions and the instruments to alter the incentives so that the outcomes are generated. Mark my words very carefully. You must create the institutions, the incentives to alter the outcomes. If our outcomes we desire as a society are that a kid at 10th grade must have this quality irrespective of economic status and caste. The child must fulfill her potential. The child must learn these things. We must enable the child to learn in a stress-free atmosphere, without rote learning, without mass copying, an understanding of the world around her, the skills to deal with the world. And at college level, these are the following skills we require. These are the following knowledge we require. Then the policy is about creating the institutions and instruments and altering the incentives and making that happen, not making a declaration that we will do it. We cannot judge a policy by the pious intentions. In that sense, so far we have failed spectacularly. Well-meaning laws and policies, take for instance, Right to Education Act, a much talked about law. Well-meaning law. Good people with good heart started that, but it's a terrible law. I'm using harsh words so that I can provoke you into thinking. It talks all the time about enrollment, which is absolutely necessary. But enrollment is to impart education, to ensure that the minds are stimulated. There is not even a single time mention of the word outcomes or learning levels. Not even one word. It talks about the length of a classroom, the breadth of a classroom, but not about how much the kid has actually learned. That's no policy, however good the intentions are. So what does this policy do to address these things? First, there is a very welcome focus not on curriculum, syllabus, lessons, but learning levels. Foundational level, what should we learn? And a clear timetable and targets. Then school level, then college level. Very clear understanding of what needs to happen. The second is evaluation. When the demand side is very strong, in India, as already mentioned, the demand side is very strong. Everybody wants education. If there is one thing that unites all Indians across our length and breadth of the country, beyond caste, region, religion, language, it is our love for our children and our desire to give good education to them. When the demand is so strong, the failure is because we have defined success narrowly, badly, and measured success badly. A terrible examination system, a disgusting examination system, which is meaningless. A degree is meaningless in most cases. A school certification is meaningless in most cases. Your inflated grades, take the Telugu states, 99% marks in 10th class. 99% is pretty common. If somebody gets 990 out of 1,000, it's no longer unusual. 950 is pretty common, ridiculous. This includes languages. Inflated grades, which mean nothing. So evaluation, the way PISA measures, for instance, your comprehension and communication, your conceptual understanding and application, and your logical faculty and deriving conclusions and critical thinking. So that measurement, stress-free, it's not about mugging up. It's not about last-minute pressure, midnight oil. It's about actually understanding and applying in the joy of learning and making a difference to the world and dealing with the world, ability to deal with the world. So that clarity has come in this policy. And instruments are created, how to go for the testing boards, and so on and so forth. I don't want to go into details. The third is, there's a clear separation between regulation and management. Today, the regulator also is the manager of government schools. First of all, they are doing very badly in government schools. They want to regulate private institutions, and there's massive corruption. I'm a medical doctor by training. There's a simple principle in medicine. Physician, heal thyself. First, you take care of yourself. If you can't manage your schools, how can you give bhashans to others? So they separated these two functions. If you take vocational education, as the policy document mentioned, in the United States, 50% of the youngsters, they are imparted very high quality skills so that they're ready for a job with a decent and honorable income with dignity. You take Germany, which has excellent programs of vocational education and training. 75% they get vocational education, and Germany, that's why until recently is number one manufacturer in the world. Today it's number 2 after China, and Germany is the world's greatest manufacturer in terms of quality. If you take South Korea, another great manufacturing giant, 96% of the youngsters, they have vocational education. China is moving towards 50% vocational education. India has 5% vocational education. We are the only country where there are more doctors than nurses. More important, more engineers than ITIs and polytechnics. And we treat vocational education as very inferior. And we don't give opportunity for you to move from vocational education to the formal degree education. That is now sought to be corrected significantly. And mechanisms are created in this policy in considerable detail. Teacher training, there's a radical overhaul that is now proposed. The roadmap is given. Clusters. 140,000 schools in India, and government have fewer than 30 children. There are actually schools, and I came out with the details in the Andhra Pradesh Assembly about 10 years ago, and the whole house was stunned. At the height of Telangana agitation, when the house was not functioning because of the data that I marshaled, and it was struck a chord among all the MLAs of all parties. In the midst of all that crisis, there was a whole full-day debate on schools. As I revealed that day, there are actually schools in this country and in our state where there are more teachers than students enrolled. While the teacher-student ratio is 1:17 or 18, in reality, the distribution is very skewed because of this. There are schools where for hundreds of kids, there are no teachers. There are schools where for 10 kids, there are 3 teachers or 5 teachers. So this policy looks at not only rational distribution of resources and consolidation of schools, but a school cluster so that there is efficient integration from the preschool level to high school level up to 12th grade, and utilization of the common resources more efficiently. And greater accountability and greater management and greater focus on the whole system. Clusters, both physical and functional clusters. Light and tight regulation, instead of giving a very tight regulation, making it a license raj and scope for corruption. Light and tight regulation, both in school education and university education. It also came up with a very rational, very balanced approach to this whole vexed issue of language, Telugu medium or English medium. Quite rightly, we all want English. There is not a family that does not want their children to learn English or in English. But what is the roadmap? If you, let's say, this webinar, let us say, somebody from China gave a fantastic address, but he spoke in Mandarin language. What is the use? How many of us will understand? Your vice chancellor will not understand, your registrar will not understand, your principal will not understand, your head of the department will not understand, I will not understand. So the issue is the child learning? Is the child grasping? How do you enable the child to grasp the concepts and build the linguistic capability and then move towards English? A very balanced approach in a flexible way, giving flexibility to states. And finally, in school education, community participation. Education is not the business of only the students and the teachers and the DUOs. It's about the community. In India, everybody, every civil society organization, every bright youngster who has done very well in education, every alumnus of a school or a college, and every philanthropist, they all want to really help education. Now, if you want to do something to improve education, you are a mendicant. Whereas this policy involves the community, gives it a role, very effective role. I wholeheartedly welcome all these elements. Quickly about higher education, all these, the points apply, for instance, evaluation, examination system, etc. But large, as the registrar pointed out, the large multidisciplinary universities, there are 50,000 colleges in India. A large number have 100 students. Most have single discipline. It's a joke that you call them colleges. A university or a college education is a multidisciplinary approach. Adequate numbers, infrastructure, intellectual and physical, and a vibrant atmosphere for cross-fertilization of ideas. Instead, we have some factories. So multidisciplinary universities, faculty and institutional autonomy. The teacher and the institution will get the freedom. The UGC or somebody else will not decide every day, breathing down your necks. And when the ISB was being built in Hyderabad, a great institution for management, when they sought UGC recognition, UGC said, no, you're not conform to our norms. We don't give you the recognition. They said, no, thank you. We are okay on our own. Now, ISB is one of the top management schools in the world. And the UGC recognized management schools are nowhere in the world. So we made this whole regulation a joke. There's no autonomy. As a part of that light and tight regulation I mentioned, and unified regulation except for medical and legal education. Assessment and curriculum, I mentioned to you already, radical change in assessment and examination system. Institutional leadership development, to be registrars, to be principals, to be vice chancellors, you require to develop bright people who have the aptitude to lead, to look at education, to have global exposure, and create leaders for the future in the field of education. Then a national research foundation. The registrar talked about the research and the deficiencies. Our numbers are few and the quality is abysmal. To address both, a shift in the focus. The management of each college entrusted to an autonomous board, both academic and administrative autonomy guaranteed to those boards. Open schooling, so that supposing I could not go to college for a variety of reasons, I want to now study, I want to have more flexible hours, give the freedom. As long as the knowledge is acquired, as long as they're proficient, there's no reason to say, you must be of this age, you must only come and sit here. Give freedom. This is the whole world has been doing for 100 years, 200 years. At last, now we are beginning. integration of vocational education with the regular degrees. World over, you have a 2-year vocational education, let's say community college in the US. And after that, supposing you want to do an engineering degree, you only have to do another 2 years. The credits are transferred. Similarly, when you want to mix, let us say, a subject which is for which there is a lot of market demand, you take a technology subject, but you want to take up economics, you want to take up music or something else. Today, no, absolutely no such facility. Like a total freedom. Some you do because you have aptitude, some because of fun, some because they give you economic opportunity, some because you have curiosity to learn. Make education fun and allow disciplines to be combined, not in a rigid format. In these universities, for instance, somebody like me, I can never be a visiting professor. Almost anywhere in the world, I'll be a visiting professor, visiting faculty if I so choose. But in India, we made a rigid, utterly insane system, which is ineffective. And we have to break out of that. We have to focus on outcomes, quality, ability, transfer of knowledge, critical thinking, problem solving, and value to society. And for all these reasons, I believe that this policy provides us a viable roadmap to improve the quality of education. It's long overdue. India lost already more than 70 years of very precious time. We should have done something like this 50, 60 years ago. I remember when I went to China some 15 years ago, Chinese were admiring Indian higher education because they did not know about our higher education failings. I knew about it, but obviously I would not tell a foreigner about my problems. I kept quiet. They were admiring because they thought their higher education was not good enough. But today, China is top of the game in higher education. In 15 years, they have become world-class now. By a variety of means, they put money, they got the best talents in the world, they encourage the best institutions to establish the institutions in China. They did whatever it took. Now China is next only to the United States in the overall research and patents and all that. And it's now generating knowledge, not only borrowing knowledge, but also creating new knowledge now. And in the PISA survey I mentioned in 2009, we were second from bottom. China was number 1 in school education. Every 3 years the survey is conducted, China consistently is somewhere in the top 3. It's not the question of how much money a society has. It's the question of how much wisdom the society has, how much passion the political executive and the governance process have. We can do it. We must do it. Our future as a country, our economic prosperity, our hopes of creating equality of opportunity, our desire to eliminate caste and caste discrimination, all discrimination by birth, and our desire to give opportunity irrespective of the origins, and our desire to create employment to the 1.3 crore, 13 million young people who are joining the job market every single year. All these depend on this one thing, quality education. And if we do a good job in the next few years, it will not happen in 1 day, 1 month, 1 year. It will take 3 to 5 years to have some significant impact. Within 10 years, we can significantly, radically alter the outcomes because all other factors are in place. But we all have to do our job. The teachers, the universities, the parents, the students, the civil society, all of us. There will be a lot of detailing required. Each of us must be able to apply our thinking caps because it's very easy to ask for autonomy. It's very difficult to actually utilize autonomy. If somebody gives a direction, you can simply follow orders blindly and then complain and criticize. But if you're asked to lead and make a choice, that's when it requires real guts and real ability, real innovation, real leadership. So we all must lead at each level, from a primary school to a high school, to a classroom, to a college, to a university. At each level, we must learn to lead, learn to take chances, learn to think afresh, learn from each other, and learn from the best practices in the world. But at all times, remember the only one outcome. The kids in our care must fulfill their potential. Their birth must not become a disadvantage to them in life. They must have the opportunity irrespective of economic status and caste of origin. And our kids must be world-class, average, not merely the best of the kids. Once we have that clarity, I think we have the instruments in place, and the resources we are spending, more money is welcome, but I don't expect it to come. The policy said we'll give more money. But honestly, I don't think that is a key issue. With the available money, we can make huge things happen. And I'm saying with the deepest sense of responsibility. Let's make that happen. And I'm sure this generation of youngsters, if you focus on this, for your generation and for your successors, this country will be far more welcoming, far more just, and far more fair. And we deserve for our children to create such an educational edifice. Thank you. I welcome your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Since I requested all the participants to write down their questions in the chat box, so some of the participants, they have written, sir. I'll just read out, you can respond.
Please go on.
Yeah. There's one question by one of the participants by name Sham Sundar. Yeah, good morning, sir. Will the current CCE policy continue after implementation of NEP 2020? Please explain, sir.
It's a continuous comprehensive evaluation. One of the problems with our country so far has been, we've been experimenting too much. Each new minister, new director, new commissioner wants to appear to be doing something dramatic, and we're messing up. CBSE started the comprehensive continuous evaluation program some years ago. But foolishly, after some years, they withdrew it. What is the idea? That each student's progress and learning levels are monitored and measured, and conscious efforts are made to improve the quality of outcomes for each kid. And the evaluation is not based on one day's stressful examination, but continuous comprehensive evaluation. But because the burden on the school teacher is a little more, because you have to monitor each child and have maintain meticulous records, obviously there's some resistance and promptly they withdrew it. Now, once this new policy talks about a radical overhaul of the evaluation system and a flexible evaluation, not one stressful examination, but multiple opportunities to improve, it implies that several models, including CCE, will be institutionalized. And that is necessary. If everything depends on those 3 hours and what you mugged up in the last 3 days and last 3 years question papers, that's meaningless education. So this policy gives a lot of emphasis on evaluation and the nature of examinations and a lot of random tests and testing boards, etc. And I think that whole emphasis is absolutely welcome. It not only talked about it, also attempted to create some institutional mechanisms to make that happen. We should wholeheartedly welcome. It doesn't mean just because we have a policy, everything will happen overnight. A lot of hard work needs to be done by intelligent people and experts. For instance, to set an intelligent question paper, like a SAT examination or ACT examination or a PISA test, it's not easy. It takes a lot of effort. To do the kind of question paper setting that we do today, it's an easy thing. It's an idiot's job. We are doing the idiot's job today, frankly. So a lot of people have to put in a lot of work, think hard, and have passion and love for the kids. So that effort has to go into that. This policy gives that opportunity. Next question.
See, another question by Sweta. She wrote, in NEP, there's a lot of importance on autonomy. It will lead to corruption. Then poor people cannot bear more money on education. It will be bad effect on the lower average income people. This is my opinion, sir. What is your opinion on this?
Okay. First of all, what is the current situation? In the current situation, the general perception in the country is that education is one area where there's a lot of corruption. Second, are the poor people or middle class people getting quality education? In general, substandard education. So first, when we critique a change that is contemplated, we must recognize the current situation. Is status quo an option? Is continuing the current situation a happy situation? No, not at all. It's a disaster. Then to address both these, I completely reject the notion that autonomy leads to corruption. It is like the British telling us that democracy is bad for you because you don't know how to govern yourselves. That's what the British told us. మీకెందుకయ్యా సుపరిపాలన మేము ఉన్నాం కాబట్టి పరిపాలిస్తున్నాం మీరుంటే తన్ను చేస్తారని చెప్పన్నారు. It's an absurd notion. Autonomy goes with accountability and transparency. If autonomy leads to decline in standards, then the college will be shut down, private or government. Now, if you don't have self-interest as an institution, as a youngster, as a teacher, then nobody can save you. Are people in Delhi, the UGC fellows or some other fellows sitting in Delhi, are they saving our children today? It's all a pretense. It's a lie. So autonomy goes with transparency and accountability. The second part, education costs money. The government will either put in money, or if the government cannot in itself start educational new institutions, the overriding approach must be twofold. One, the quality of education must never be compromised. Two, nobody, and I mean nobody, shall be denied higher education up to any level, depending on their ability and their desire. Their ability and their desire and willingness to work hard. They will not be denied the opportunity for want of money. The society must create opportunities. The policy repeatedly makes emphasis on that. Either give free tuition or scholarships or soft loans, a variety of things depending on a variety of situations. But basically, nobody shall be denied quality education up to any level because of economic background. That's the overwhelming objective. It has nothing to do with autonomy.
Yeah. There is another question, sir. One minute, sir. Just a minute. According to NEP 2020, investment of education on GDP 6%. In this situation, in India, is this possible, sir?
The short answer is no. For decades, we've been talking about 6%.
Sir.
But the 6% number itself is questionable. I'll tell you why.
Sir.
6% presupposes that most of the children are going to public education. Because of the destruction of education system, a majority of children are moving towards private education. Take schools, out of the 24 crore children in schools, roughly 50% are in private schools today. Even the poorest children are going to private schools increasingly. Even in the last 10 years, when we spent lakhs of crores on school education from the government and government schools, there is a 45% increase in private school enrollment. There is a 20% decline in government school enrollment. And who are the new kids? The net increase in the kids going to private schools, these are the poor kids, because the rich and middle class already left for private schools long ago. Now, in that backdrop, the primary objective is not to put more money. The primary objective is to make the money that's already being spent work for the children. Focus on outcomes. Given that, I don't think 6% is important. If money comes, I welcome it, but I don't expect it to happen because we are in a fiscal crisis. There are other sectors which are hopelessly underfunded. Take healthcare. India is among the worst in spending and outcomes both. In education, we are not the worst in spending. Outcomes are bad. Therefore, given that fact and given the general fiscal stress and the COVID-related crisis, that is merely a slogan, like every government slogan. I don't take that seriously, but that's not important. You can actually provide quality education at 4.4% of GDP from the government if you design the institutions and the incentives right. And that's what the policy aims to address.
So there is another question which is more or less related to your response, but there is one interesting point that one of the participants point out, sir. Dr. Suresh, he said, I think without resources, we cannot improve the quality of education while governments are failing to spend 6% of GDP. How can we achieve such lofty objectives?
No, that's a wrong argument. You know how much money is spent on school education in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana? Can you make a guess? Per child, we are spending 80 to 90,000 rupees per year in government schools. For the 66 lakh children in government schools in both these states, the governments are spending 55,000 crores. So to say that we're not spending money, we are talking in air. 50% kids are in private schools, please remember. In fact, I am arguing that the poor children in private schools also must be funded by the government, and we can fund them with the money available if you redistribute it properly. Yeah. More money is welcome, but that because there is no money, we're not able to improve education is a lie. It is a lie, simply. Many people believe it in a well-meaning manner, but they're not examining it critically. That's not the truth. More money is welcome. I'm not opposed to that. But lack of money is not the cause. When much less money was available, the quality was much better. So I don't believe that, my God, we didn't spend 6%, therefore we can't get education. It's an absolute lie. 80,000 rupees per school education per year per child is a hell of a lot of money. That is almost equal to the per capita income of India. There's almost no other country that's spending that kind of money on school education related to per capita income. There are many schools that are providing good quality education at 25,000 rupees per year. I know, I have seen them, scores of them. So more money is welcome, but that's not the key constraint. We must erase it from your minds.
Yeah, sir, I think the Delhi model clearly shows the relationship between public expenditure and quality education.
We have already discussed enough. I have given plenty of evidence. I can cite more and more evidence. I am saying more money is welcome, but more money doesn't guarantee outcomes. Last 10 years, we spent lakhs of crores extra, but outcomes actually deteriorated.
Yeah.
Do you want more evidence? Go by evidence. Go by evidence. Don't go by intuition. Go by evidence. Go by logic.
So there is one important question by Rajesh. He is asking, sir, can we believe if this policy implemented reasonably in a good manner, does it really going to help the rural children to get the quality education?
Absolutely. See, good education helps primarily whom? The rural people and the poor people. The rich people and the urban people, particularly urban rich people, you don't require to have a policy. They'll take care. They will have their own schools. They will manage somehow or other. They will put money. They will send their kids abroad, do whatever it takes. So a policy and a robust educational system is necessary for the weak and the poor and the rural kids. I grew up in a village. In those days, my teachers were paid a 70 rupees salary per month. The school had thatched huts. When there was rain, the roof was leaking. There was very rarely any furniture. An Alabal unde primary school. Only after a certain class, we used to have benches. It made no difference. It made no difference. Good education provided by the government or by a sound policy is primarily necessary for the poor and for the rural kids. Otherwise, you don't have to bother. For the rich and the well-heeled, they'll take care of themselves, their own children. You don't have to bother. That's why I'm saying As long as they're taking care of their children at their own expense, let's not bother about 6% or whatever. It's not important. Even today, higher education, the best benefits are going to the rich people. When the government is spending enormous money in expensive institutions, better institutions, who are the ones benefiting? The rich and upper middle class families. So don't worry too much about the money. You focus on the improving the quality of outcomes of the poor and the middle class, lower middle classes, and the rural people. And spend whatever you can, but spend wisely and well. The rest will take care of itself.
Thank you, sir. So there is another question by our OSD to the Vice Chancellor, Dr. Madhusudan Reddy. When we look back to our history, we were best in education with world famous universities like Nalanda. Then where did we lose the quality string? Was it losing independence for more than 200 years under British rule, where we were ignored of quality education? We know it takes more time to regain our status, but what are the immediate steps need to be taken at school level to have strong foundation, and at university level, what are the issues to be addressed, sir?
Dr. Madhusudan Reddy, you're right. We had the world's oldest universities. Nalanda, Takshila were more than 2,000 years old at the time when university was not known globally. But if you take universities today in the world, Oxford is 1,000 years old. Cambridge is 800 years old. Many universities in Germany are 1,000 years old. 1,000 years old. They're continuing. Harvard is 400 years old because America is a young country, relatively speaking. Whereas our understanding today is just because they give some 10 crores an order and give a GO, a university is created. Universities take generations to nurture. That's why instead of building more colleges, creating more universities, building a culture of learning and enlarging them is more valuable. If you go to MIT takes in every year more equal students, the equivalent number to all the IITs of India together. Our approach is to create more and more IITs. No, enlarge an IIT, because to create that culture, that atmosphere, to bring that kind of brain power, the advantage of synergy, multidisciplinary approach, it doesn't happen just because you create 100 institutions. Scale is very important. Time is very important. The culture you create, the team you build over a period of time, the leadership you develop is very important. There are historical reasons why India declined in education, and it predated British. No, we blame everything on the British. But to be fair, we lost steam by 1500, and the West started rediscovering itself with the Renaissance around 15th century and 16th century. And then by 17th, 18th century, they got industrial revolution. We missed the bus at a critical time of relooking at all this and systematizing the ancient knowledge available, building on that, experimentation, scientific method. We missed the bus. We were resting on past laurels. Even today, oftentimes we talk about our great hoary past, how we had Pushpak Vimana, or how we had some fantastic nuclear weapons, etc. We have to actually build on the ancient knowledge and the current knowledge. China in 30 years, 20 years has built on the existing knowledge and is now creating knowledge. So always talking about a glorious past is not enough. While we must have pride in our past and our culture, and I yield to none my pride in our past and our culture. We are a great country with a great history and civilization. But what matters is what are we doing now, not what we have done then. So we have to, luckily, China has shown us the way. In today's world, you can leapfrog. You can very quickly make up the lost ground. 25, 30 years ago, it was inconceivable that China would have 5G. It would be leader in 5G. Or it would be a leader in maglev transport, or in bullet trains, or in construction engineering. Today, in all these fields and many more, China is not number 2, or also it's number 1. 30 years ago, it would have been inconceivable to think that our mobile phones would be better than American phones. Our mobile phones are better than American phones today. We can leapfrog. So we can quickly make up, but if we do this right way and very swiftly with great passion and dedication.
Thank you very much, sir. There is another question by Guguloth Balaji. Respected sir, we are blessed to have your class, sir. Sir, world is running on English medium and communication skills. In fact, 90% of the jobs decided based on the individual communication skills and fluent English. Besides this, NEP 2020 is introducing again to teach the mother tongue. Then how the students can cope up with English in middle of the schooling, that is after 5th standard. Can you respond, please, sir?
All of us want English. There is no doubt whatsoever. When I speak in Telugu, I mostly speak in Telugu today also, because there would be people who would not know Telugu. I'm speaking in English. Otherwise, I speak in Telugu whenever I address all Telugu audiences. But I actually think in English. Though I grew up with Telugu as mother tongue and all my schooling was in Telugu, over a period of time, all my learning, my communication, my interaction has been in English. And therefore, I think in English and translate instantly into Telugu. So obviously, I would love English, and I would like every child to pick up English and the ability to think and to apply and use English language. But, and this is important, in our so-called English medium schools, what is happening? Let's be truthful. A non-English knowing teacher is teaching a non-English knowing kid in English. The teacher doesn't know English, the kid doesn't know English, and he's thinking he's teaching in English. What's happening? There is simply no conceptual understanding. This policy is not talking about teaching only that one language. It's saying any language that the child understands for some years. If the child can speak in the family and those surrounding in English, teach in English. In Telugu, teach in Telugu. In Urdu, teach in Urdu for a few years, 3, 4, 5 years. But simultaneously teach English language. And slowly, by 5th grade or so, make it bilingual. By 10th grade or so, they'll be comfortable with both and they'll be easily able to switch over. So it's not the question of liking English or not. It's a question of what is the best way. If after 10th grade, if at the age of 15 or 18, you can't tell time, you can't weigh some vegetables, you can't do a simple arithmetic application, what pretense is it? English or Telugu or Urdu? What are we talking? Therefore, much of this debate is irrational. Mahatma Gandhi, way back in 1916, on February 4th, at the time of inauguration of Banaras Hindu University, he made a point on this. He said, look, we all need to learn English, but if you try to force teaching in English on kids who do not know English, on an average, a kid is losing 6 years of his life at a very critical time of life, because they're not able to grasp, they don't understand what is being spoken. So let's do it in a pragmatic way. And there was no greater communicator than Mahatma Gandhi, in Gujarati or in English. Very simple, very straight to the heart. So this notion that we are teaching in English medium, we're doing a great favor to children, is an absurd notion. And the policy does not say don't teach in English or don't teach in Telugu or anything. It says, as far as practical, make sure that the child is taught in a language that the child understands. What is so wrong about it? The child understands. If the child doesn't understand, what do you mean you're teaching? If what you say is not understood, where is teaching there? Teaching for whom? So that critique, I know many people believe that, but it's completely off base.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. There is one question by K. Haritagaru. Good morning, sir. I would like to know from you the various measures need to increase to increase the competency of the faculty of the education system. Does policy focus on this element, sir?
You know, the policy focused enormously on this. In fact, I was particularly happy because they mentioned it a great deal in school education about teachers, teacher training, revamping the whole teacher training, etc. And in university education, again, they integrated this, creating the educational enterprises, special courses in education itself, pedagogy, etc. So there's a lot. I didn't go into technical details, but a lot of thinking has gone into it. A lot of integration has gone into it, and I'm happy about that. The policy addresses that very effectively and in considerable detail.
Yeah. So there is one question by Narendra. Sir, he is asking very interesting question. If you can respond, please respond. Good morning, sir. Part of the Telangana movement, education was a very important thing to mobilize the youth and students. After Telangana formation, is there any new thing that has come up? Kindly comment on that.
No, it's not fair to single out Telangana.
Yeah.
Across the country, the numbers I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, they are valid. Our outcomes are abysmally poor at school level and college level across the country. If it's merely only in Telangana or only after Telangana state formation, I would have said, no, Telangana state formation is bad or good on account of this. It's not a fair thing. Across the country, our political class and bureaucracy have failed our education and our children. It's unrelated to whether Telangana is formed or not formed. Therefore, that must be kept out. That Telangana is weak in education, that Andhra Pradesh is weak in education, that Gujarat is weak in education, that even Kerala is weak incidentally. Though literacy levels are a little better, if you take actual educational outcomes, no state is good, trust me. And I'm speaking with authority on the basis of evidence. So we are doing uniformly badly across the country.
Yeah. There is one response for your explanation, sir, by Suresh Anuganti. Sir, blending our ancient knowledge system with the modern knowledge is the need of hour. But while doing so, we may face a challenge that while translating translating the Indian knowledge system, some may object that by saying that it is something deeply related to the religious in nature. So delinking religious beliefs and ancient knowledge is important. To make it more sensitive and secular, what steps we need to ensure that no one should hurt by such feelings?
No, in ancient knowledge, there are three elements in every society. You have religion, every society. For instance, poetry of a certain kind, many other things, they're all based on, obviously, the religious beliefs and other things. They play a significant role, particularly the more ancient, the more religious. Then culture, independent of faith, the way the society's traditions and culture and lifestyles evolved, and knowledge. Now, religion and perhaps even culture largely are about your languages, because literature essentially encompasses culture and religion, whether it's Shakespeare or Milton or Keats or Shelley or somebody else. Inevitably, the religious beliefs and religious idiom, all those things play a role, or Odyssey and Iliad by Homer or somebody else. The prevailing beliefs will certainly play a tremendous role in literature. Our own Mahabharata, Ramayana, or you cannot really separate literature from religion and culture in language and perhaps even understanding history, etc. But when it comes to science, there's no reason to mix these two. Let me give an example. There's a lady called Tu Yu who got Nobel Prize in medicine, physiology and medicine in 2015 from China. What did she do? She, along with her band of workers, she's a pharmacist. She worked on the Chinese herbal medicine and came up with a drug called artemisinin for malaria. Today, world over, artemisinin is the mainstay drug in the treatment of malaria. It came from the Chinese herbal medicine. Now, in India, for instance, in our own Ayurveda or our own traditional system, there are many remedies which are efficacious. After all, India is the country which discovered the first drug against leprosy, chalmugra. Even during Buddhist times, it was known. Even in modern medicine, the first drug known against hypertension, blood pressure, is an Indian drug, Reserpine, from Rauwolfia serpentina, Sarpagandhi. There are many such things. But the problem is, unlike 2UU, we are not systematizing that knowledge. We are not developing that knowledge. We are not validating it by conforming it to modern standards. We are simply going by some old beliefs. That simply will not do. In the wake of COVID, there are 16,000 proposals made by some Ayurveda practitioners making some claims that this drug will work, that drug will work. Some may work, some may not work. We do not know. But we have not done work in validating. There is nothing like modern science and old science. There's only one science. What was believed to be valid at that time is no longer true. When mankind did not know the origin of the eclipses, solar or lunar, they believed in Rahu and Ketu. That was ancient man's imagination. Later, they came up with something else. Then at one time, we believed that Earth is the center of the universe. Then something else goes on. But that's not the permanent knowledge. Knowledge has to develop. It doesn't mean that they didn't know anything. For that time, that was advanced level. And that's why even today, the ancient people can actually tell us the tithi, the var, the nakshatra, etc. They can tell us the movement of the position of the stars and so on and so forth, because there is some understanding of astronomy, but not good enough, not to suit today's conditions. So unless you validate it, unless you apply that knowledge, if you go on making claims which are unverified and bombastic claims and very universal claims, that will not lead us anywhere. So there is a lot of treasure in ancient knowledge. There's no question, all over the world. But societies that are wise and smart build on that treasure of knowledge and validate the ones that need to be validated, that can be validated, reject those that cannot be validated. That is how societies grow. Merely believing that my ancient past was fantastic, everybody lived for 5,000 years, they were all very healthy, they were 20 feet tall, all this is fantastic nonsense.
Sir, another important question by one of my faculty fraternity, Dr. Boomaya, and I also have the same idea, sir. Sir, education is in concurrent list. But
yeah, there was some power outage. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay, please go on.
Yeah. Education is in concurrent list in the constitution, but now union government made education policy and forcing the state governments. Is it against the federalism?
See, I am a great believer in federalism. Probably in India, I'm one of the strongest champions of decentralization and federalism. In fact, I never in my life use the word central government. It is banished from FDR and Lok Sabha, union government. I'm that strong. I'm fierce about it. But this is not centralization. The union has a role. The states are key players, ultimately, particularly in school education and even in college education. Most of the role is that of the states. But in India, happily, there was never serious discord. There's no separate union policy and state policy. If the policy is rational, it will be automatically adopted. And this policy, if you see the wording carefully, it's very flexible. It does not say, you shall do this manner. It's laying out why and how. A very reasoned kind of an approach with enough flexibility and local initiative. And the overall architecture, so that there are some benchmark across the country, that's what the union declares in its policy and tries to implement. The rest of it is states. Ultimately, except the CBSE and some national level boards, most education at school level is local. And even colleges, they're now creating a new framework of regulation nationally, instead of the old UGC, which has failed in my view. And ultimately, the universities, they're all created by the states. Therefore, this is not an impingement on the state's freedom. As I told you, I'm one of the staunchest defenders of decentralization and states' rights. But to see education policy as an infringement on states' rights is completely misunderstanding federalism or decentralization.
Okay. So there is, sir. Can I go ahead, sir? Or
please.
Yeah. So there is one response from the participant. He is asking, as you said, policy. There is a lot of difference between slogan and policy. So, is this NEP 2020 is a policy or just a slogan of education? Slogan on education.
It is a policy broadly because, as I mentioned, it actually attempts to create institutions and incentives to alter the outcomes. There is a conscious effort. First, they diagnose the problem correctly. They recognize the current situation, and they came up with institutional responses, setting the right kind of targets and the right kind of path. To that extent, it's a sound policy. But just because you write a sound policy, that's an important thing. Without a sound policy, nothing will happen. But just because you write a sound policy doesn't mean it will happen. Ultimately, execution, a lot of things have to come in place. Therefore, now we must focus on what to do to implement the policy in full measure and to constantly improve and update.
Yeah. And there is another question. Maybe if you wish to answer it, you can answer, sir, but I just want to read out. Will the parties with the right-wing ideologies provides a policy which allow us to stimulate our minds and think critically, as it may against their interest?
You know, whether you like it or not, world over, there are political parties. Some parties you may think are better, some are worse. Or every party in some respects is good, some respects is bad. That is the truth. Just now in America, for instance, there is a Republican Party's national convention going on. There are some elements of what Republican leaders are saying on the stage which are sensible. Some you and I wouldn't agree. Some elements that Democratic leaders are saying that are sensible, some you and I wouldn't agree. Similarly, whether it's BJP or Congress or TRS or TDP or Vaikapa or some other party, they keep saying some things. Not everything is wrong, not everything is right. And please remember, while a government is for the time being headed by a certain party, it's not owned by that party. The country is not anybody's grandfather's property. Take Dr. Kasturi Rangan, the man who headed this committee. He's an eminent scholar, a former chairman of ISRO. I know him personally, has been a good friend. I have been associated, I was not a member of the committee, but I've been associated. Many scholars who have no parties, no caste, no region, they're associated. We all care for the country. So just because it happened during the tenure of a certain government, it does not mean that it is that government's private property. And just because it happened during the tenure of some other government doesn't mean that should be discarded. In India, we have this terrible habit. Go by the content. Go by the logic. Go by the reasoning. Go by the conclusions. What is good? Adopt. What is bad? Reject. Not because of who is saying it, but because of what is said. Whether the reasoning is or not. Go by evidence and logic. And I am going by evidence and logic. If the same government at the national level comes up with another policy elsewhere where the evidence is badly marshaled, logic is all flawed, conclusions are bad, I would say this is wrong for the following reasons, not because Narendra Modi said it. So we must remove that. That's what education is. Politics happens, you like it or not, you vote whomever you want. Ultimately, somebody has to be in power. Somebody will be in opposition. How does it matter? Don't be too wedded to that. Go by each element individually, go by the logic and evidence. Otherwise, we will always have alibis for failure. In this battle for power all the time, the losers are the people of India. Whoever wins, we end up losing always. I believe that we must end up winning always. I don't care who is winning and losing in the battle for power. At the end of the day, it's about our lives. So if the policy is a sound one to improve the quality of educational outcomes for our children, it's good, welcome it. If it's insufficient, tell them what more needs to be done. If it's bad, tell them why it is bad and ask for and fight for something good. That's the right approach.
Shall I go ahead, sir?
Please.
Yeah. Hello, sir. How it will helpful that conducting one entrance exam for getting admissions into many university across the country after completion of degree? What is the impact of Hindi on southern Indian states if we think about one nation, one language? Thank you, sir.
I am not in favor of one nation, one language. If in India, there's one thing our national leaders have acted with extraordinary wisdom and foresight is recognizing that each language is important. Language is the umbilical cord of a society. If you make a language a very hard issue, the nations would not survive. Take Sri Lanka, a tiny country, an otherwise very civilized country, in some respects much better than India, education, healthcare, infrastructure, etc. But for 30, 40 years, there was so much of strife and violence and bloodshed because they could not accommodate two languages, Sinhala and Tamil. Pakistan, that became independent along with us, broken from our country, could not survive as a united country because of language, Bengali versus Punjabi. 25 years they broke up. Belgium, a tiny country, smaller than many of our small states, is finding it difficult to form a government most of the time because there's a strife between two languages. They don't know how to accommodate them. The Flemish people who speak the Dutch language and the French-speaking people. Indian leaders were very wise. They realized that it's a very dangerous thing to make a language, to force a language on the people of the country. And therefore, A, linguistic states, and B, recognizing all the languages, 22 languages in the 8th schedule of the Constitution, giving them equal space. I think that policy must continue forever. It doesn't mean we should not learn Hindi if we feel the need. After all, we anyway learn Hindi because Hindi films, and you want to do business, let's say in the northern part of the country, you must know a bit of Hindi. And people in Hyderabad anyway, in Telangana, we all know a bit of, not very good Hindi maybe, but we know a bit of Hindi, Urdu, Hindustani. So that anyway will happen because of communication and interaction. But don't ever force a language. Okay. The other part, common entrance examination. While we have to do a lot of refining, as a general principle, to establish a benchmark is not a bad idea. Look at, let us say, SAT examination in America. For most of the university admissions, the SAT examination, it's called Scholastic Aptitude Test. There's also another examination called ACT, a similar test of reasonable quality that measures educational outcomes without too much of stress. You don't have to mug up. It's not based on memory, but you really have to understand and grasp. Universities must have at least a reasonable level of screening. And what is expected of a university student in terms of school level understanding and learning outcomes is somewhat universal. Therefore, as long as language is not an impediment, you must give the students the choice to pick up the language in which they have learned, whether it's English or Hindi or Telugu or Marathi or whatever language. Therefore, for India, the test cannot be a single language and definitely cannot be merely two languages. It has to be multiple languages. As long as that is the case, having one standard test is not a bad idea. But obviously, a lot of calibration is required. For instance, if you want specialized courses, the test has to be, for instance, already for engineering admission, there's a test. Obviously, that test is necessary. Medical admission, there's a different kind of test. We can improve them. But with those modifications as required for the unique features of a certain university course, but having a benchmark across the country for university education is not a bad idea.
Yeah. Sir? Hello?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Hello?
Please go on.
Yeah, I am Upendra Reddy, sir. Namaste, sir.
Yes, Upendra. How are you?
Sir, I am okay, sir. All right. Sir, this is with regard to this mother tongue policy, sir. Really, they came up with a very good policy of this mother tongue, but NEP is only a policy directive. But really, in this climate, it is required. So, what to do in order to implement it in all the schools? What is your idea? How to go about it to make it mandatory?
Upendra, we cannot have our cake and eat it too. Take Andhra Pradesh government. Wisely or unwisely, they have decided to go for English medium in all schools. I think the idea is sound, the intentions are good, but it will not work. I told you the reasons. But if Government of India says, no, you must only have Telugu medium in your schools, it becomes a fight between the union and the states. The real issue of improving education is forgotten. Therefore, the policy wisely said, as far as practicable. Therefore, if a state, and perhaps Andhra Pradesh is the only state to my knowledge in India, which is saying all our schools will only have English medium. To my knowledge, I may be, please kindly correct me if I am wrong, there is no other state, tiny states may be saying some Nagaland, etc. But among the large states which have their own languages. No other state is saying that you shall only be taught in English at school level. Now, what I presume is this policy is reasonable and practical and flexible, and therefore most states will adopt this. And eventually, there will be some comparison. Ultimately, all right, if in English medium, you're teaching and they're doing well, you can learn from that and say, all right, why not go for English medium itself? Maybe there's a way of overcoming the handicap. Or supposing you find that if you teach them in English instead of in Telugu or in Marathi, in the first few years, the kids are not able to pick up, it's actually hurting them. Then we say, look, this is the evidence. Therefore, while the intention is sound, let us improve that. So the comparison will always bring about correctives. I think that's the right way, flexible policy. Otherwise, the whole panchayati, the whole fight will be about language rather than education. So the policy, I think, is flexible. I don't think we must force it down the throats of anybody. But in general, I would say 90% will follow this path because that is the only sensible path.
But the status quo will continue, sir. If at all, if it is as far as possible, even in RT also they said that it is as far as possible. So we know better. Worldwide research has time and again proved that children
I
learn
agree
better,
with you. I completely agree with you.
But why
I
can't we
completely
take
agree with you.
Many countries they are following. Yes, sir.
I completely agree with you. See, if it 30 years ago, I would have said we must teach our kids only in Telugu. But today, you like it or not, what happened is the aspiration of every family is, rightly or wrongly, a belief that if my kid is taught in English, that kid will do well. And supposing we tell them what we are saying now, it can be easily misunderstood to say, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan wants his children to go to English medium schools, but he wants my child to go to Telugu medium schools.
Yeah.
It's not about something superior, something inferior. That's why the language I'm using very carefully. I'm not using the expression mother tongue, please remember. I'm not talking of culture. Whatever be the language that the child understands. And then leave it to the parents' wisdom and then let the future reveal itself. Because now things have gone too far. The ship has sailed. We messed up quite a bit. So taking a hard position will not solve the problem. I understand what you're saying. Actually, my son went to Telugu medium school up to a certain level. The school that taught, the way I'm telling, up to 5th grade or so Telugu medium, up to later they made it bilingual. After 8th grade or so, they moved slowly into English. So I believe in that. But my daughter was born in a government hospital, but I cannot force all society to say, you must only go to this school, you must only do this language, you must only be born in this hospital. These are personal choices. You like it or not. We're in a democracy where already attitudes are hardened. We messed up for 70 years. Therefore, even when you are right, you have to understand the context and be gentle and nudge them and persuade them, because after all, parents don't want to destroy their children. They care for their children more than you and I. If sometimes they have mistaken belief, persuade them, don't impose. If you try to tell them that I know more about your children than you, it's a very offensive thing. You must be respectful. You must show evidence. You must be persuasive. Anything else will not work. I understand what you're saying, and I know you are right. But even when you are right, in a democracy, unless you learn to persuade and make them see their best interest, by orders and dictates, more damage will be done.
Yeah, there are many questions, sir, actually. I'll try to club some 2-3 questions into one question so that you can answer.
Please.
One thing is, sir, one participant asked that, sir, so far, is from Hyderabad Central University, sir. So, so far in India, all primary institutions like higher education institutions, in the name of central universities, IIM, IITs, these slats are actually, getting whatever that financial support that's supported by central government in a greater level. But when it comes to regional universities, state universities, there is a lot of disparity, and we expect the downtrodden sections of the society should come up with a quality education when it goes to employment or any other matters. So does this policy, the NEP 2020, have any solution for that? Is it really, suggest that proportionate distribution of financial assistance should go to the all education institutions?
I wish I could tell you the answer is yes, no. It is not. Because in a country which is poor, that's the difference between a poor country and a rich country. Even a rich country finds resources are not adequate. Even America or some other country always says, look, how do you find adequate resources for the sectors where it's needed? In a country like India, when the capital is scarce, money is scarce, we need everything. And a large country cannot ignore some sectors. We require elite institutions. You require high quality research. You require an ISRO. You require an atomic research center. You require some high level technical capabilities in some areas like Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology. And you require universities. You require IITs. You require the mainstream education. So you have to allocate. Ultimately, it will be inadequate. But such as it is, the policy tried to create a framework in which the supply and demand can be met, and the kids are not denied education of quality if they have the ability and the desire and the willingness to work hard. Sometimes public money will come. Sometimes it will come in scholarships. In fact, redeployment, for instance, if 90,000 rupees is spent on per child in school education, supposing it's possible to give children at 30 or 40,000 rupees per child by better deployment of resources, government or private, doesn't matter, but nobody will be bearing the burden of this education cost if they are poor, then that's all that we seek. I don't care as government or private. So you require that kind of nimbleness, that flexibility. I don't think there is a possibility of the government putting in more and more money. I wish I could say, let government put in another 5 lakh crores of rupees, but there's no money in the kitty. Truthfully, there are other sectors which are much more desperately in need of money. You take healthcare sector, we are spending only 1.3% of GDP, the lowest in the world among all significant countries. Education, we are spending 4.4%, while 6% is needed. World over healthcare, they spend 8 to 9%. In fact, healthcare expenditure world over by the government is much higher than education. In India, it's incredibly low. Every year, 5 crore people are becoming poor on account of healthcare costs or poor health. 5 crore people annually who were not poor earlier, according to our statistics, are becoming poor. So you require multiple sources. There are many, many demands on the money. I wish I could say, like any irresponsible opposition leader, bring more money, you're useless. But you must always judge it by one standard. If you are the prime minister, if you are the chief minister, if you are the finance secretary, if you are the finance minister, with the money available, with the demands, with the needs in the country, what will you do? If I cannot do it, I cannot demand others to do it because it's a lie. It's hypocrisy. I don't ever indulge in hypocrisy. I try to be as truthful as is humanly possible.
Yeah. Sir, one more question by Madhuru Ram. Yeah, he's asking a simple question, but I think it's very interesting. స్కూళ్ళల్లో ఇష్టారాజ్యంగా ఫీజులు వసూలు చేస్తున్నారు. ఈ పాలసీ ఈ ఫీజుల నియంత్రణ విషయంలో రాష్ట్రాలు కానీ లేదా కేంద్ర ప్రభుత్వాలు కానీ ఒక స్పష్టమైన చట్టం ఏమైనా తీసుకురాగలుగుతుందా, లేదంటే నాణ్యమైన విద్య సామాన్యులకు అందరి ద్రాక్షగానే మిగిలిపోతుంది?
The real problem is supply and demand. Supposing I say, let there be fee regulation, there are plenty of laws. There's no dearth of laws. Plenty of committees. What is happening? Corruption and fees are not really controlled. So there are two approaches. The approach that is followed is all bogus. It's failed. So I don't want to go into that. But two legitimate approaches, which will actually yield results. One is, first, improve the outcomes. The policy focuses on improving outcomes, government or private. Why is there so much demand for some schools and where the fee structure is very high? I don't know if you're aware, about 70 to 80% of the schools are budget schools, even in private sector. About 50% of the schools charge less than 5,000 rupees per annum. We are not talking about those schools, are you? About 70% of the schools, they charge less than 10,000 rupees per annum. We're not talking of those schools, are we? We are talking of a few elite schools that are charging lakhs of rupees. So our whole focus, our whole debate is skewed. It's only addressing 1%. But why is that 1% becoming all important? Because all of the schools have failed in general. Everybody wants only those schools, but I cannot afford them. The demand is far greater than the supply. Therefore, the price has gone up. Therefore, I'm saying regulate. Now, either that fellow has spent enormous money to build those schools and built infrastructure, which is more than necessary, some of them in air conditioning, etc., or they have enormous clout and they can bribe or they have influence. Therefore, they can charge because the market is commanding a fee. But basically, the supply is inadequate. The demand is unlimited. Without addressing that, if I merely say I regulate it, you only create avenue of corruption. You're not regulating the fee itself. So the real answer is improve the quality, improve the supply. In government schools and private schools, the quality of education. So the policy talks about shutting down the private schools where the quality outcomes are bad and treating government and private schools in terms of academic regulation uniformly and universally, not have differential approach. Once the outcomes improve significantly, this kind of irrational demand for a few select schools will come down. The second element is transparency. What is the infrastructure we have? Who are the teachers? What are their qualifications? What are their salaries? What is happening, etc., etc., etc. If these two things are done fairly, a lot of the problem can be overcome. There's a third element, and the policy does not talk about it explicitly, but I'm aggressively pursuing. There are many poor families that are forced to send their children to private schools because they lost faith in government schools. Now, up to a certain ceiling, if the government does not bear the cost of these children's education, let us say if the government is spending 80,000 rupees per child in government schools, what is the difficulty in paying up to 15,000 rupees in private schools for the poor families? What sin have they committed? Why should education of a child be a burden on the poor? You are spending 80,000, there's no education there. If they're getting at 15,000 rupees, let us say, a ballpark number I'm giving, subject to a certain ceiling, what is wrong? But measure the outcomes. Don't bother about government or private. As Deng Xiaoping said, whether the cat is black or white is immaterial. All that matters is whether the cat catches rats or not. So that kind of a sensible policy approach, rather than I regulate, I control and fear his statements, where we had all these statements all the years, nothing happened. So this policy provides space for that. The third element I mentioned, the policy is not explicit. It does not preclude it. It's not explicit, but some of us are working hard to make that happen too.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Actually, there are so many questions I could see in the chat box, but because of time constraints, I may not be able to ask all the question. But last question that I would like to take an opportunity and enlighten myself, sir. Sir, I also came from a Telugu medium background. I belong to a small village, and my parents, they are not educated per se. But I have studied up to my intermediate in Telugu medium, then studied in English medium degree and post-graduation. It's fine, but my question is, out of my little experience, I would like to, request, because your voice will reach to the nation at a larger level. My humble request to you, sir. Okay, I have a different opinion on the question of language and meaning of instruction. That aside, but sir, can we really think one thing is important to my mind, that whether medium of instruction in mother tongue or whatever it is, I think that knowledge or whatever the syllabus, the curriculum that is there, more or less across the India, it should be available in every language, at least the recognized languages, if not so that whether it is in Hindi or whether it is in English or whether it is in any of the regional languages, so that the students will have access to the same sort of knowledge, same sort of the curriculum. Then when it comes to the competition for the employment, competition for even to grow up themselves, I think that will in some way will address the certain questions that are there from the margin sections. And I think what your take on that one, you please respond.
No,
and
Professor
finally,
Samgar, please go on.
Another important thing that just I would like to know your comment on this. Sir, there is a lot of uneasiness among the marginal sections. I also come from Dalit background, sir. When it comes to Dalit, the language question, certainly, but for some reason we all made, especially the upcoming downtrodden sections, we are all actually aspiring for the term called good education within quote. Good education, now it has become equated with the English for good reason or bad reason. So thing is how to actually, as you said, how to pursue it actually. People like you can only give some hope. Otherwise, if any political leader come with a good intention, it doesn't work, sir. So it is all our responsibility to try to rationalize and then try to educate both sides. Please comment, sir.
I think both are excellent questions, Professor Kumar Swamgaru. First is creation of knowledge in language. Actually, that's, I think, a key requirement. Our languages are not growing. To some extent, Hindi is growing because Hindi is borrowing much more than other Indian languages from wherever it is. But other languages are not growing as much. Even Hindi is inadequately growing compared to the great global languages. World over, in Japan, Japanese, Korea, in China, in Germany, in France, in many other countries, the language of instruction is their local language, and they develop the language to a level where they can accommodate all the modern knowledge. Now, unless we consciously make an effort, a lot of people in a lot of areas, the languages will not grow beyond a point. And therefore, for instance, I studied in Telugu medium, you studied in Telugu medium, but after a point, Telugu medium or Telugu language is not sufficient for you because the knowledge generation is not in Telugu. Even the vocabulary is not created in Telugu. In fact, I myself created several words in Telugu. I had to, because there are no Telugu words equivalent, but many more words are required. And if you come to sciences and technology, much more needs to be done. We haven't done at all much of that work. Some of us are making some efforts because now technology has come to our aid. There are some wonderful people who are now translating the whole Wikipedia content into Telugu. I completely endorsed it as I participated in their meeting the other day. We'll do whatever it takes to help them. I'm myself translating all the content of khanacademy.org up to 12th grade into Telugu so that the best knowledge, the best way of teaching children, the conceptual knowledge in a modern way without rote learning is available to every kid. My team is actually doing that. And one or two other Indian languages also will do it. It's not so much the cost. You must have the passion, and a very competent team must be there. So the technology now gives us tools. There is no open source software. Many other courses, take MIT, the world's best engineering school. Its whole course content is now open source software. There's no reason why that should be denied to a Telugu people, provided you develop Telugu language or any Indian language to that level so that somebody who is not very comfortable with English can pick up the same level of knowledge. So that effort must be consciously made. In sciences and technology, in humanities, in political science, in administration, a whole lot of areas. And until that happens, there's always going to be a gap. The country is going to be the poorer. But as I said, luckily, now the time has come. The technology is a great leveler, but you must use the technology wisely and swiftly. The second is unquestionably, many families, the poorest families, the aspirational thing is English medium. I went to Telugu medium school. Then mine was the first intermediate batch, first 10th class batch in the new era, 1969 10th class batch, and then intermediate. I went to Loyola College, which was then the best college in Andhra Pradesh, integrated Andhra Pradesh in terms of college education. I went to the principal myself and I said, Father, I will take admission only if I get English medium here, because there was some talk at the time that they'll introduce Telugu medium. I fought for it. He said, son, if you don't get it, who will get it? Because I got a good score and all that. But the point is, that's a normal aspiration. Therefore, our argument can never be against English. My argument is not against anything, it's for something else. That is, the kid must learn. If the kid does not learn, language is secondary. If the kid learns in English, English is perfect. The kid learns only in Telugu, Telugu is perfect. Then move towards English slowly. Therefore, I never use the idiom and the argument of mother tongue or culture. These are bad arguments. The only argument is the kid's intelligence flourishing? Is the kid's potential fulfilled? Therefore, everybody's aspiration to be proficient in English must be respected, and we must create mechanisms. But in creating mechanisms, there is a building block, there is a ladder. I want to reach the second story. I cannot do it by a single jump. If a kid does not understand a sentence in Telugu or English, then how can the kid learn? A simple thing, this pen is on the table. Supposing you tell them in Telugu, "Ee kalamu lati ee pennu ee balla meeda unnadi." A 3-year-old kid understands instantly. Supposing you're teaching in English medium, now the kid must understand the meaning of this pen is on the table, and then the syntax, the totality, the meaning. By the time this kid tries to understand the meaning of each of these, the kid who's naturally understood what it meant, he's miles ahead. That is the point I'm making. We must give an opportunity for everybody to learn English and grow in English. No question about it. Because that's what the future is, that's what the aspiration is. I'm saying, what is the best way of making it happen? Pretending that we're doing it and ensuring that the kids never grow? Or doing it in a responsible manner so that the kids actually grow? I want to be a doctor, let us say. Nothing wrong in that aspiration. But to be a doctor, there is a certain method. You must study first science, you must understand biology, then you must understand human anatomy, human physiology, then human biochemistry, then pathology, then microbiology, then the medical knowledge, the surgical knowledge, etc., etc. I can't simply give him a stethoscope and say, become a doctor.
Yeah.
So the argument is not about whether this language is right or wrong. For good or for bad, in India, we no longer have the luxury of saying our languages are so well developed, everybody has an opportunity, you can learn, therefore use our language. It's not true. During Nizam's time, even medicine was taught in Urdu. Dr. Channa Reddy did his MBBS in Urdu medium. He was also a very proficient English speaker. In fact, I knew Dr. Channa Reddy very well. He was one of the most sophisticated users of English language. But he studied in Urdu medium, MBBS. The kind of work they have done to develop languages, we failed to do. Therefore, you like it or not, English medium is necessary as you go higher and higher in India today. But therefore, the first question you asked about improving the languages, developing the languages, allowing them to grow. The second, preparing the kids to be able to understand and utilize language. So it's not about which language, whatever the language, does the kid understand? And does the teacher who teaches understand? Even for me, when I went to intermediate, and I was by any means a reasonably good kid, I refused to mug up essays and all that. I wrote my own English essays and other things at school. Despite that, it took me several months to get adjusted to English medium. That's the truth. I'm not saying that effort should not be made. It must be made at appropriate level. Once you understand syntax, once you have a basic vocabulary, once you understand the language and the ideas flow easily for you, and the sequence of logic is easy for you, then you can learn in that language. Learning the language is different from learning in the language. If I can't easily, if the conversational flow I don't understand, if ideas do not flow, how do I learn in that language? I pretend that I learn. As I said before, if supposing somebody made this address in Mandarin language, he's a brilliant Chinese scholar, a Nobel laureate, but he spoke in Mandarin. Would any of us understand? No matter how intelligent, how smart, how well-educated you are, how many degrees you have. So what's the purpose of that? If people of our background cannot understand a language we don't know, how can the small child understand a teaching in a language that the child has not learned? That's all I'm saying. So let's not make it an issue of rich or poor. The rich and the poor are entitled to get English education. But let's first teach them English and teach them how to learn in English before teaching them in English. The sequencing is all I'm urging for the sake of our children. Professor Kumar Sangwari? Am I audible? Hello? 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 Okay, I'm not able to hear you. Any questions or shall we conclude? Kumar Songar, you're not audible. Probably you have to unmute yourself or something. If I don't hear from you, then I will just say a couple of sentences to conclude, because I think we are well past 12 o'clock. Friends, there seems to be a technical glitch. We are not able to hear Professor Kumar. At least I'm not able to hear Professor Kumar Swami. Friends, there is no perfection in life. And just because a good policy, reasonably sound policy is made, there's no guarantee that it will yield results automatically. But a good policy based on sound reasoning, based on evidence of the past experience, based on international best practices, is a key to any kind of progress. And a good policy must create institutions, instruments, and incentives to create outcomes, because ultimately education is not about how many fancy degrees you have, or how big buildings you have built. It is about the quality of outcomes, the kind of brain power that is generated, the kind of knowledge that is created for the country's prosperity, for creation of employment, for empowering individuals, and for creating opportunity for everybody, and for helping promote equity and opportunity in society. I think there is a reasonable framework here, but we have a lot of work to do. And we'll continue to improve. There's nothing perfect. There are elements there which are not satisfactory. And in a very complex country, in order to satisfy all people, there have to be some compromise. There's the art of compromise in a democracy. But I believe that there is a realistic chance. I don't say things lightly. I neither praise nor condemn people casually. But when something is right, broadly in the larger public interest, our duty lies in encouraging it, and if correctives are required, to try and see if the correctives are possible. Let us all join hands at whatever level we can to work for this, because as the policy says repeatedly, good education is not the business of a vice chancellor alone, or a teacher alone, or a minister of education alone, or a DEO alone. It is everybody's business. We all must join hands and work hard and put in our resources, our time, our passion, and our creativity to make the policy work, and to bring in the correctives, to innovate, to improve. There are many people, for instance, in Mahabubnagar area, there is a foundation called Vande Mataram Foundation, doing fantastic work on school education. I have learned quite a few things from them. Peer learning is what they have actually perfected. And I have talked about this to Kasturirangan Committee. Now, in the policy, that peer learning also is included. So there's a lot that constantly needs to be improved. I'm sure if this policy is properly implemented, India will have a framework for a better society, an equitable society, a better economy, and it will dilute the caste system. It will promote dignity of labor. It will improve skills and enhance economic growth and prosperity. I wish you all the very best. Good luck to you.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, may I request Dr. Madhusudan Reddy, sir, to give a vote of thanks for this session. Who is the Vice Chancellor of Palamuru University? Madhusudan Reddy, sir. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Okay. Sir, can you hear him, sir?
I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Right. Right. Madhu sir.
అన్మ్యూట్ చేసుకోవాలి.
మీకు వస్తుంది సార్? No. There is some technical problem, sir. మధు సార్, మీరు ఆడియో పెంచండి కొంచెం.
మనందరికీ కొత్త కదా ఈ టెక్నాలజీ అంతా, ఇంకా అలవాటు పడుతున్నాం.
ఓకే సార్, ఓకే. హలో,
కుమారస్వామి గారు, మనం క్లోజ్ చేసేద్దామండి, టెక్నాలజీ గ్లిచ్ ఉన్నట్టు.
Okay, sir. No, sir. I'll just, otherwise I'll just take a few minutes, sir, because it's my responsibility and it's my more of this thing. Yeah, Madhu, sir, I think there is a technical problem with you. It's okay, sir. I'll take on. Yeah. There is some technical problem is there, sir, since time is up. Let me take a chance, sir. Sir, on behalf of the Palamuru University, Vice Chancellor, to register, sir, from all the departments, especially particularly from Political Science Department, Palamuru University, I convey my regards to Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, sir, for accepting our request and spend almost two hours time to ignite us and to disseminate whatever the knowledge that he has with him. Sir, thank you very much for your kind words, and especially there are so many things that are there in minds of the academicians, especially the student score, even in the administrative point of view. We have several questions, queries, doubts on the new education policy. I hope all the participants have gained some reasonably good knowledge over the document that is there before us. And as rightly said by you, sir, given the Indian society structure and the multicultural diversity that we have in India, every one of us should get involved into understanding the new ideas that are there in the education policy. And then every one of us must give our best, sincere efforts to cope up with the ideas that are there in the draft in the days to come. In that way, I think we can contribute much more good things to the Indian education system. And part of this 1 week national webinar, we took up you, sir, as a first speaker, because we trust one thing that you are the right person to actually, ground the whole idea. What is that education? What was the education system that we had? And in what way this new document is really has certain new things in the form of documentation. So whatever we thought in taking you as a first speaker, you have done absolute justice for our ideas, sir. Thank you very much for that idea. And in the days to come, we look forward so many things from your side, sir. I would like to convey one thing to you, sir. Palamuru University is a very small university in terms of structure, in terms of other infrastructural. In fact, it's a budding institute among the several other universities that are there in Telangana. But in spite of having a lot of difficulties, we, all the faculties of Palamuru University, with the cooperation of the great able administrators, we are trying to do our best, sir. So in that process, in this COVID pandemic situation, almost all the departments have been engaging in acquiring the knowledge from the different eminent faculties, eminent scholars like you, sir. In the days to come, we request you to kindly, whenever it is possible for you, whenever you visit this area, please visit our university and give your valuable suggestions, so that ultimately it will go to the needy student score. Because all the state universities, especially Palamuru University, it is full of with marginal section students. Since it is located in a regionally backward area, all the student score we have very marginal section students. In the days to come, we look forward to your suggestion, your help. Thank you very much, sir, for your kind time for spending your time for the inaugural session, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed the interaction. The questions were excellent. Good luck to you all. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think we have to call him, sir. Also.